Hello. In game I go by Gertrude Oath, and I recently hit level 100 in Settlers League, and wanted to share all the info I have from playing Depth's Oath as my lead setter over the past few leagues. I noticed that there weren't really any recent build guide for Depth's Oath, so I decided to make one myself. This video is just supposed to be a culmination of all the info I've gathered over the past few leagues while browsing PoE Ninja Ladder for Depth's Oath. There will be a lot of generic info, so I'll try my best to timestamp the videos so you can skip to where you want. To start off with, we can go over the pros and cons of the build. Death's Oath has a super smooth mapping experience. You really only need to move around and let Death's Oath do all the work. The only time you ever use other buttons is for when tanky rares or bosses show up. The build is really cheap, and all you really need is one chaos to buy the Death's Oath to get the build going. For cons though, the build isn't really suited for most endgame content such as T17s and Ubers. The damage for single target isn't the greatest, usually hovering around 2 to 3 mil DPS, and its physical max hit usually hovers around 10k, which is really low. And since the build stacks auras and curses, you need a lot of mana reservation, which can lead to very expensive gear. I'll first go over how I usually lead start this build. I personally level with Caustic Arrow, but I would not recommend it. Instead, I'd recommend using something like Toxic Rain or Poisonous Concoction if possible. While going through the campaign, once I get my first Road Marker drop in Act 6, I immediately head to Heist and start farming it for currency and levels. The basic strategy I have in Heist is to buy 2 to 3 Demolition, Lockpicking, or Brute Force contracts. I bring Huck with me for the additional XP bonus, and repeat contracts till I get to level 62 and have enough currency to buy my first Death's Oath. I've gotten asked a few times on how you go about getting enough strength to equip Death's Oath, or how you get enough chaos resistance to sustain it. Firstly, remember that the chest itself gives you 40 to 50 all attributes, so really all you need is 130 strength. Equip something like a heavy belt with crafted strength, and replace it with your normal belt once you get the chest on. As for chaos resistance, I'd recommend putting some points in the protection mastery section to the right of the Pain Attunement keystone. There you can find 39% chaos res. Another place where you can get a bit of chaos res is above the Supreme Ego keystone, where you can find another 17% chaos resistance. This section is a little messy, but the point of this slide is for you to pick 2 to 3 auras that you like. The ones highlighted in green are the ones I'd highly recommend using, and the ones in orange I wanted to mention since some people use those instead. First, we have Purity of Elements. I never realized until this league how good this aura was. The elemental resistances and the ailment immunity helps keep your gear cheap and opens up your jewels for more damage and utility. If you were to drop any aura though, this would probably be the one. Second, we have Malevolence. This aura is pretty much needed for this build since it provides us with so much dot multi. We then have Determination. I personally believe that this is also needed for the build since we're already squishy enough to physical damage. Then we have Grace. A lot of people used to use Grace with this build, but with the recent nerfs I don't see the reason to use it anymore other than the Watcher's movement speed mod. Lastly, Haste is also a viable choice of an aura. The Watcher Eye mod are incredibly good for this build, and if you have enough damage or survivability for the content you're doing, it's a completely viable option. This section just has a few other auras I've seen other people use. Vitality is nice to mitigate the Death's Oath damage you take, and the varying mana reservation it has lets it be used whenever you have a slight bit of mana unreserved. Herald of Ash I've seen a bit, but I don't understand personally why people use it. I can say that it does make the Profane Bloom pops extra satisfying and visually pleasing, it's just not worth the 25% mana reservation in my opinion. Aspect of the Spider technically isn't an aura, but I wanted to include it here anyway. People usually craft this on an open suffix on their quiver or gloves, and the extra damage and slow it provides is very meaningful. Here, I just wanted to show the 4 main curses that I see people run. These are all pretty self-explanatory, and you should try to include them into your build as you are able to apply more curses. As for unique helmets, I'd highly recommend using Virudi's Veil. Some people only like using one magic ring, with the other being Death's Rush, but I personally like running 2 magic rings since being hexproof allows you to run more map mods and lets you take certain altars like Searing Exarch's curses you inflict are reflected back. On lead start though, Virudi's Veil isn't very accessible since it's a Maven drop, so another viable option is Heretic's Veil. The increased reservation efficiency really helps you fit more curses and auras into your build. We then have unique amulets, and Presence is typically the go-to amulet because of all the useful mods it provides. Life, Chaos Resistance, Despair costing no mana, they're all fantastic mods. However, Replica Dragonfang's Flight gives you so much more damage on a Caustic Arrow, and having a 10% reservation efficiency roll can surprisingly save you even more mana compared to Despair costing none. I'd only do to swap to Dragonfang's Flight though whenever you start pushing for a lot of auras and curses, and Presence should still be your go-to at the start. This slide I didn't know where to fit, but these are 2 mechanics that I thought were interesting to build around. If you have a crazy quiver, Widow Hell can give you a lot of options. Though the damage is not comparable to your typical tossed arrow bow, getting something like T1 life on your quiver means it almost an extra 500 life from your quiver. I personally used Widow Hell as I leveled from 99 to 100 just because of the amount of bulk it gave me. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is the new rune enchant that you can put on bows. This combined with an elegant hubris could give you some crazy damage, but it will require you to drop Glorious Vanity. The only other application that I can see with this enchant is getting jewels of minion damage on them as well. The main reason why people feel squishy when playing Death's Oath is due to the lack of physical mitigation. A Granite Flask with increased effect and percent increased armor during Flask effect on it or some other flask provides you with a lot of bulk. Combine that with a Molten Shell and you can be running around the map with 3 to 4k Molten Shell mitigation, going up to 6 to 8k when you use Vol Molten Shell. Another guard skill you can use instead is Steel Skin in case you don't have much armor on your gear. Endurance charges are also a really good way to go about mitigating physical damage. The Enduring Composure notable is really good. You can have max endurance charges for like 80% of the map if you use this. Pantheons can also provide a slight bit of physical mitigation, Soul of Lunaris for general mapping, and Solaris whenever you're bossing. In previous leagues, most Death's Oath builds hovered around 3k to 4k life. Now, with the new life rolls though, it should be pretty easy to hit 5k to even 6k life. Be sure to get T1 life on all your gear and quality your rings and amulet. The most expensive way to go about mitigation in general, of course, is Progenesis, but I put it here last due to how expensive it is. The bow and quiver is incredibly important for increasing your damage. In the description, I'll put 2 crafting videos that I highly recommend watching to see how to go about getting them. The bow is relatively deterministic, while the quiver is a bit more of a gamble. Caustic arrow gem levels are also really important. Do whatever you can to get it as high as you can. Jewels are the only other source of damage I can think of. 8 passive large cluster chaos jewels, Transcendent Mine, and just generic chaos dot multi-jewels can provide you with a significant damage increase. Another thing I wanted to talk about was timeless jewels in general. Don't just buy a glorious vanity jewel. Try to look at a timeless jewel calculator and search for useful mods. It can add pretty big notables like these 2 mods shown here, but it can even help you fill out the rest of your resistances if you need it. I don't really know what else to put in this video. I didn't really expect to make this, but I decided to make it since so many people are asking me questions in game. If you have any questions though, feel free to DM me in game, or just leave a comment here and I'll try my best to answer them when I can.